Welcome back to an Action Game Maker tutorial. Today we're going to go over setting up an animation for a simple top view character. So with that said, let's get started. Alright, so here I am in the Bazelot Quest project. You can get this by going to the Action Game Maker hub here, and there is a sample tab right here, and you can just download it and go into play. Now I wanted to show this error right here because I want to show you just a quick fix if you are playing this. This is basically the way that Godot can transfer some tiles. Sometimes they get messed up when you are transferring them like this, like how it's doing. And so basically to fix this, you go to tiles right here, click on this tile collision right here, and basically what it's saying is that this texture went missing. And so if you just click on it, click on quick load, type in collision, click on open, and then you're going to have to give the tile size again, which I did was 24 by 24. Hit yes, set up collisions, and then the only thing you need to do is double check the collisions by clicking select, click on a tile, go down here, click on physics layer, and see if you have bubbles on the corners. This one doesn't, so I'm just going to hit F, and boom, I applied the collision. I'm going to go to this one too. I can't remember if I use it exactly, but I'm just going to click on this one. Then the last thing we need to do is go to this tile set and do the same thing. It's basically the same thing. We click on quick load, type in collision, click open. This one should remember all the other stuff that we wanted. However, we do need to verify that the collisions were actually set in it. They weren't, again. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And then boom, we're going to click save. If we go to project, reload current project, we should not have those errors anymore. And yeah, so that is how you get rid of that error. I just wanted to show that because it is going to be a common thing, I think, with these samples. All right, so this sample comes with a lot of characters to try for top-down view, and I'm going to show you some tricks and tips on how to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new game object, and I'm just going to call this the new player, and then we're going to come down here, say characters. It is going to be a sprite 2D character here, and this one actually has a top view character base, so let's just click on this and see what this is. Actually, this is new, so we'll just click on this. We want this to be a player, and we want it to be manipulated by input devices. Now, these detections and stuff like that, that is a whole different topic. We're just going to go over animations today. So I'm going to hit on create right here. All right, so let's see what it set up here. You can see on the owner node here, it gave us the player controlled object, which is what we want. It automatically set up our animation player, which is really nice. So it gave us a sprite, an animation player, a camera target setting, which let's change this to new player. And then let's see what else it gave us here. On the base settings, we want enable auto H flip. This is so that we can just use one direction and it will be the other direction as well. We'll still have to set up down and up animations, but at least the right and left can just be the same. And then we want to go down here, and these all look good. Another setting that I want to make sure is that we have floating on so that we do not get stuck on other objects here. And then let's go to move and jump settings. We want to put our inputs for up, down, left, and right. Here we can give priority, which one will be the inputs if we wanted. And then I'm going to go down here, make sure everything else. One thing that you might want to do is set the gravity to 0. And this means that you wouldn't have to set it to 0 in any of the visual scripting, which is nice. However, I would recommend actually on a top view game to go to the root scene nodes, so a game scene node, and put the gravity as 0 there. And that way you don't have to worry about any objects being set specifically to 0. All right. We might want some diagonal movement normalizing. That's usually good. Maybe a little bit of corner adjustment, something like that, just for your top view game here. All right, so let's go on to animations. I'm going to bring this in and zoom in here. I'm going to hide the area detections since that's not what our focus is right now. And then we're going to go to the sprite here, and we're going to go to the texture, and we're going to quick load. We're going to type in, I don't know, let's type in NPC. I have a bunch of sprites for an NPC here. And let's just do this old man right here. Click on open, and you can see that we have a sprite sheet. Looks like a traditional rpgmaker sprite sheet, and that's what it is. And so now we're going to set this up. So the first thing we want to do is we want to set the H frames. This is going to be the partition for the horizontal. And then we're going to tab and go to 4 for the partition of the vertical. All right. Now we want to keep in mind that this is a top view game, so we want Y sorting to be an option. And so in order to do that, we're going to make sure that the feet are at this red line, and that way all Y sorting will be at the base of each object kind of a thing, or character. And so you could do this by going to the transform and bringing up the Y. I do not recommend messing with the transform unless you absolutely have to on things like this. I don't think it's probably important for Action Game Maker specifically, but for Godot things, you might get used to that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to offset, and I'm going to offset the picture itself, the image. And I'm just going to offset it. What I do is I click and then I drag left or right, and it just kind of gets me in the ballpark. And then I can kind of see where it's supposed to be, and I'll just round it up myself. And so here we are. We have the image, and the next thing to do is to make animations. I'm going to go to the animation player right here. What we're going to do is we're going to click on animation, click on new, and then I'm just going to say idle down, and I'm going to hit OK. So what this is now I can set keyframes. I can also set a default animation if I want it to be default or not. Now, if you're using the visual scripting, it doesn't really matter. But since you can use a sprite and an animation player without visual scripting, this is how you would say, hey, when you start this game, this is what I want you to show, is by clicking on this button. And also loop and things like this. We'll get into this here in a minute. But what we want to do is just hit the idle down keyframe. And so we're going to go to sprite here. We're going to go to frames. We're going to find the idle one, which this is the one that looks more like idle. And then we're going to hit shift and click. And when I hit shift and click on this keyframe here, it's going to also create a reset thing that is going to show. Now, you want to keep this reset frame solid, like you want values that will reset automatically. So for example, in the sprite here, let's say that I wanted to adjust the skew on the idle right here. I wanted to give it like a 5 or maybe more to show it off a little more. This much of a skew. If I hit shift and click, it's going to also show it in the reset as well, except for it's going to retain the value. So you want these values on the reset to be as neutral as possible. And when I click 0, you can see that it didn't update. That is because Godot 4.3 does not update when you update values directly like this. But Godot 4.4 does. So if Action Game Maker ever upgrades to 4.4, this will also update the image, which is really nice. If you want to update it real simply, you just click play and it will update the keyframe. But I'm going to go back down here. You can see the boom. And then now if I go to reset, it's going to go like this. Now having a clean reset is very important for things like collisions, specifically in disable or particularly sizing, resizing the collision. Another one is also rotating and scale. Those are very important to keep a nice reset value for these. So now we can go back to the idle down. I do not want the skew. Matter of fact, if I click on the trash of the skew, you can see that the reset one is also gone. Basically, the last key of that type of property will be gone when you get rid of it. So I'm just going to reset this right here. And now we can continue to move on to the actual other animations. So the next animation, I'm just going to duplicate this and I'm going to say right. Now I'm going to do this as if you have a strip, a sprite strip that is only of right, basically. So let's just say that you're working with strips in general, actually. What I'm going to do here is for each strip, you're going to want to keyframe the texture. So in this case, I want to keyframe this texture for idle right. Now, since texture property is above the frame property, you want to move it above. Basically, you want these properties to be in order because they're ran in order. So if you have a different texture for this animation, and then it has different H and V frames, you're going to want them in order so that they get applied correctly, and you're not showing something weird in the frame because the frame was first, if that makes any sense. All right. And this doesn't really apply to this guy, but let's just say I wanted to go back to my down and I wanted to have a different image. Let's go back to NPC. And in this one, he is Harold. Okay. Then what I would do is I would click on this and now bring this up here. And now in the idle down, he would be Harold. In the idle right, he would be the old man. And that's because I changed the texture. All right. Now, I just wanted to point that out because if you are working with strips, which is actually my preferred way to work in Godot, is you're going to want to get used to keeping texture. And so with that, you're going to want the idle or the reset to also be the texture that you want to reset to, basically. So like an idle animation usually. All right, so I know I showed that. I'm going to delete it because it doesn't really apply in this case. So you'll notice now that I deleted it and I go back to write, I'm still Harold. And that is because that was the last texture that I left it in. So I will have to go back here and I will have to go back to old man. And then these should work. I just got to find my sprite here. Notice how I lost it on this screen. So what I'm going to do is click on sprite and go out here in this area and hit F, and it's going to take me back to that sprite. Those work on the scenes too as well, by the way. When you're trying to find something and you can't, you can click on it, press F, and it will take you right to it. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is still continue creating animations. So we have this right animation right here, and we want to set it to the right idle. So I found it, I'm going to set it, and that is great. Now we're going to run into an issue here later on, and then we'll work through it from there. And then we're going to do one more duplication, and this is going to be idle up. And we're going to go find this right here, and boom, we have our idle up. Now the cool thing about Action Game Maker is this is all you need. You need a down, a left, or a right, and then an up. All right, I'm going to show you how this works. Basically, we're going to, now that we have these animations set up, we're going to go to new player. We're going to go to the animation sets right here. We're going to add. The key for this one is going to be idle. And I want it to have 3 directions. I want to turn the auto Y flip off the top and the bottom one because this is going to be idle down. This one's going to be idle right. And this one is going to be idle up. And then we're going to give the up arrow only. We're going to give the right, the left, right, and diagonals for both sides. And then for down, we're just going to give the down only. Now, if you wanted down and up to have priority, then you would give these guys the diagonals and you would take the diagonals off the left and the right. So just so you know, however you want the priority, I'm going to choose the left and right one on this one, and then you would choose on your game. All right. Now, this auto Y flipping is important because that is going to, well, it's going to be important later on here. But now that we have the idle here all set up to go, we can then go to our visual script, which I already added a visual script. I attached, and then I attached it to where I saved it. And then we're going to click on it and go to actions, and we're going to assign the idle animation. Now, and then let's rename it too. And now we can real quickly playtest this. I basically went to village side. I got rid of the starting point in here if you were following along. I got rid of the starting point, and then I basically right-clicked and instantiated a new player like this, right? And then I'll get rid of this old one. And then what I did, oh, I got rid of both of them. So let's instantiate, again, a new player. And then I went to the scenes transition. I left-clicked or right-clicked and hit set start scene. And then I went to playtest. So now if we playtest this, we should have an idle animation with our new player here. And you can see it starts to the left, but notice that it is flipping the wrong way. All right, but the up and the down are working correctly. But these are flipping the wrong way. And that is because on the new player's animation here, we have it as the right. Now, let's just real quickly show that if you did set it up to the left here, so let's set it up for the left-facing idle, and let's play test this one. Now you'll see that it will probably work correctly. Yes, it works correctly. So that is one way you can do it, is you can actually just set it up to be the left-facing, and so this would be idle left, so you would have a down, left, and up. But some sprite strips don't have that option, and you are stuck with being on the right. So I'm going to show you how to solve that one as well. All right, so let's go back to where we were. All right, so I got that one in. And so what we're going to do is we're going to utilize this H flip right here. Now, this H flip is going to make it to where this sprite is basically flipped from its normal design. So we're going to H flip it. Now, the thing is that we have to create a keyframe for it, or else it's not going to know to remember it. It's going to be that way for everything. And we're not going to want that on everything. We just want it on this particular animation. So I'm going to hit keyframe. Now, one thing I noticed is that I wasn't on 0 when I created it. So I'm going to have to drag this to 0. Another way that is really convenient is drag the time frame, click on the thing that you want or multiple that you want, and hit Control X and then Control V. And then you would just paste it where you want it on that time frame. This is very useful when you're working more with particular snap settings and things like this. All right, so we have it setting the H flip. Now, the only important thing that we need to remember is first off positioning. So this H flip is ahead of the frame. So we need to make sure that this is moved up ahead of the frame. The next thing that we need to do is make sure that in our reset, it's also like this, and that it is off by default for if it ever runs this reset, which I think it might when it goes from state to state. I don't think it does when it's in the state, but when it goes to another state, I think that's when reset might be played by ActionGameMaker. However, I'm not a heads up sure on that exactly. And so what I do to be safe is I just make sure in every animation, I'm saying what I actually want the reset on this one. So I would do this and I'd move this up. I want it off on idle down. And then on idle up, I want it also off. And I'm just going to make sure that I reposition it. When I'm doing my stuff in normal Godot, I basically am keyframing all of these things kind of at the start. But that's because we have in a game that I'm working on, we have a lot of things going on. So I make sure I usually have most of this stuff keyframed. All right. So now if I playtest this, because we're using the H flip, even though I have a facing right when facing left is the default, I can now use it just like I was the facing left one. So if you are stuck with a sprite strip or something that is only facing right, there is ways to use it. So I definitely wanted to show that. And then to show how you needed to set this up in the other ones as well. All right, so real quickly, I'm just going to make a walking one so that we can show how to loop them. So I'm going to go like this and duplicate this to be walk down. And instead of making all my downs right now, I want to set up the walk down and then I'll duplicate the walk down to be my other directions. All right, so in my walk down here, what I want to do is go to sprite and we're going to be walking down. So the first frame, I want to actually be a walking part of it. And I want to keyframe and then it's going to go to an idle and I'll just keep clicking keyframe and then another keyframe. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on this one and copy, Control C and Control V. And then I'm going to go to the next one over, and that is going to be my ending limit. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it into here. And then I'm going to click on this, and that means loop the animation. We're going to hit play, and wow, it is going super fast. So we need to change this, and how we're going to change that is we go down here to the time frame. And so this is done in seconds. You can see you also have one for FPS as well, if you want to use FPS. But I use a lot of seconds, so I'm kind of used to it. So I will just put it as 0.1. Let's just go with 0.1. And then I'm going to notice that these drag out now to 0.1s where they need to be. Now this one was a little like this. Move that out. So you might have to do a little bit of juggling here. And then we also need to raise this count right here. And then we can play test this and see that, boom, it's a little slower. I'm just going to work with it. You might want it a little slower, move it at, 0.16 or something like that. But boom, we have walking down. All right, so now that I have the walking down one ready, I'm just going to duplicate this and go to up. And the only thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my up frames. Here's the first one. Boom, boom, boom. And I'm going to copy paste this one. And now we should have our walking up. Awesome. And then the last one that I need is I'm going to stick with the right one. So walk right here. And then we're going to go back to the sprite. Now you can just click on the sprite real quick to get back to it as well. And then we're going to go back to the walking right and go boom, boom, boom. And then copy, paste this one. And now we have our walking right. All right, so the last thing to do is go up to here. And this one this one is the animation directions for idle. So we want a new animation category. This one is going to be walk, and then we're going to set up the directions for walk. Now I'm going to do walk down, I'm going to do walk right, I'm going to do walk up. I'm going to click off on these ones. I'm going to click the arrows on these ones, and then walk up. And then boom, we have a walk. So if we go to the script here, we can go like this. This is going to be our walk. And then the input, what I'm going to do here is trigger on an input style of, let's see, any 4 inputs being pressed. All right. And then I'm going to make a shortcut and then copy this one. But instead of any 4 inputs being pressed, it's actually just no input. And we'll just do simply no input. Last thing I got to do is just make sure that it's using the walk animation. Now we can play test this, and we can move here, and then boom, it's moving. But notice that it is not working, and that's because we didn't add the H flip. So we'll go back down to the animation player, walking right, and yep, sure enough, it's not H flipping. So here we go, and boom, there we go. We're walking, and everything is working good. All right. Now, one thing I want to show you is that you can do a lot of things in the animation player, all right? So let's just say that you have a audio stream player that you've added a sound. So let's just do a quick load of a sound, and let's just do like this grab right here, all right? So this is going to play this grab sound. So what you can do here is you need to save it, I think, but you can add a track, you can call a method, you can call it from this audio stream player, and then you can insert a key and you can say play, all right, and it will play. Now you have some other options as well. If you click on this keyframe, you can go to the arguments right here, and this is the value type. So you would have to know what the argument is, but it kind of tells you when you go like this. It says play, and then you can choose a float from position. So you could do that. You could choose the position that it starts at, basically. Otherwise, if you leave it at 0, it plays from where it's at. All right. So you could do this with these kind of things. You could also do this with hit detections. So you could disable hit detections so that they are off and on. That's really useful when you want to make a player invincible in one state maybe, or change the location. You can do this with all sorts of things. So let's try one example, which would be an attack, for example. Let's just change the thing around. All right. So instead of making an attack animation, I'm just going to click on idle here and duplicate this and call this attack down. And I'm just going to use the idle animation. Then I'm going to go to idle right, duplicate this and call this attack right. I'm then going to duplicate attack down to be, oh no, idle up, and duplicate this to be attack up. All right. So now what I'm going to do is now I need my hit area, my attack area on so I can see it. And we can see that this is the shape that I have it. Let's just make it a little, if you hold Alt, you can kind of scale it together. So let's just make a shape like this. This is a good sword shape, right? And then I'm just going to move this attack. When it's facing up, I want it to hit everything in this kind of a range. Maybe a little more like if it was a sword swing, boom, right? So there we go. Okay, so this is my attack when I'm going up. So what I want it to do is I want it to first not disable. So I want it to not be disabled. I'm going to right click on this keyframe. And you can see that it added an attack collision and added the disability or disabled. So now it's on. And then I want to also move it into this position. So this position that it's in, I like it. And I'm going to add it right there. So now in the reset here, I want to make sure that my disable is making it disabled on the reset. And I want to make sure that the position, it actually doesn't matter. So I don't really care what the first position is on this because it's going to be disabled and it's going to go to another position when the next animation plays. So let's just go to right here. And you can see that I'm actually facing left because of the auto flipping. So it might just be best to name it left, in general. So anyway, I'm sorry if that's a little confusing there. And then we're going to go back to this attack detection. I'm going to move it right here this time. And I'm going to enable it and then move the position right here. And then on the attack down, I'm going to move it down to here and turn the disable on, keyframe it, and then put it into the position and keyframe it. All right. So now I have all of these things. So the one thing that I want to do now is I'm just going to make this walk be the actual attack, but I got to set it up first. So here we go. Let's go to animations directions for idle, animations directions for walk. So add another one. This one's called attack. And let's add our directions to it. Let's add attack down. Let's add attack right. And let's add attack up. All right. This should be set up. And on the walk here, I'm going to now play attack. And then I'm going to go to debug and hit on visible collisions so that we can see the collisions. And then we're going to just see what happens here. All right. So by default, you can see that it is disabled. And then when I walk right, it is enabled. And when I walk left, it is also enabled. So you can see that the reset is actually not going at all. So while I'm used to setting up a reset, maybe you do not need to set up a reset. But the thing about this is that you will need to make sure that all the other keyframes, for example, in idle down, I don't want it to attack anymore. So I would need to make sure that my attack area disabled was on. And then I would need to make sure this on the right and on the up and on the walk down and on the walk right and on the walk up. Now, a simpler way, I'm just showing you that you can do this via animation. This is one way that you can do it. The simpler way would actually be to go right here, click on actions, and say that the, let's see here, change object property of the attack collision disabled equals off. So it's disabled when it's in here, and then it is enabled when it is in idle. So that would be the actual more simple way, but you'll see that both ways are working. So if I go and ignore this, and I go and ignore this as well, you'll see that my attack collision will be going in and out of disabled. All right, I know this video is getting long, but there's one more thing I wanted to show you, and it was how to add easing to your keyframes. So for example, a very common thing to do is in each node has a visibility kind of section where you have a modulate and a self-modulate. Now, real quick, just to explain it, modulate means that any child node is also going to be affected by this parent's particular color. A self-modulate means that only this node is going to be affected. So a lot of times, you just kind of whatever you need in this moment. Now, these modulates aren't going to work at all, and that is because there is a shader material applied so that we can use filters and things. For this example, I'm going to remove the shader material, and that way we will be able to see these values. But you could do this for any kind of a value, as far as you could do this for position movements as well, but that's a whole different topic. So I'm just going to just note that this is not something you probably be able to use on a normal object in Action GameMaker. But so we have the modulate, and you can see that, I can modulate the color. So let's just say that I wanted it to start from the normal color and then go to this kind of teal color. So what I would do here is I would say on this keyframe, I would put the keyframe on so you can see that it's the normal color right here. And then let's just say by 0.4, I want it to be blue. All right. Now I'm going to put this keyframe on right here. And then let's go to, let's just say that the animation, well, actually, this is fine. I'll just lower it right there. Okay. So now I'm going to stop this and we're going to watch it. And you're going to see that it slowly goes blue. Matter of fact, let's make it 0.7. We can see that it really kind of slowly transforms into this blue. Okay. So, and then let's say that we want it to go back to white after that. And so we have this like little kind of easing in and out a little bit. However, it is all linear right now. So it is all just the same time, and it basically divides everything into even portions. We also have easing that we can do for like in and out easing. So let's just say that we wanted it to go very at the beginning. What we would do is we would drag this easing bar over here, and this would mean that it would go blue quicker, and you can kind of see when it starts going blue. And then if you pull it out this way, you can kind of see if it starts going blue more right here. So if we have a line like this, the blue is going to basically start instantly and then go from there. If we have the easing from a little lower, it's going to be white a little longer and then go into the blue. All right. Now that's only set up for this one, for this side to this side. If you wanted to get easing in this one, you would have to click on this one, and then the easing would be applied to this next spot. And so that's how you would differentiate the easing. So in this one, it's going to go blue and stay a little longer and then instantly kind of go back to white. So that is one kind of easing. Now, let's say that you didn't want easing at all. You wanted it to go white to blue to white. Well, one thing you could do is you can click on this one and you can click nearest. Now, what nearest is going to do is it is going to only change that property when it gets to that frame. So right here, you can see that we have white and then it goes blue and then white. All right. So another position or another thing that is useful for this, I guess, is positioning. So if we go right here to transform, you could say, hey, we want it to start at this position right here. But then let's say we're making a walking animation, but then we want it to kind of look like it's bouncing. So we apply a little 2 like this, and then let's go back to here, and then I can copy both of these nodes, and then copy them, and then I could, let's see here, that's 6 to 4 to 8. So then I could copy these nodes again. So now we kind of have this repeating up and down action here. Now, this is all linear movement. You can see it's going down and back and forth slowly. I could add some easing to it, but I also could just say nearest, and then this is going to be more like a up and down kind of a movement if you wanted that effect. So just note that you have the easing options right here to use on any kind of a keyframe. And then you also have these, what kind of things do you want to do? Do you want to do linear, cubic, or nearest? Nearest is going to be the frame only, like there's going to be no smoothing or easing. Linear is going to provide you with some other kind of easing options. And I've never really used cubic, so I'm not sure the advantage of a cubic, but I just kind of stick with these ones. And yeah, I definitely wanted to show you this because that can add some power to your animations. All right, so real quickly, that is just how you can set up animations. You can also do other things as far as animations go. There are some alternative ways to set up animations. I know that there's a plugin that takes from a sprite and sets up an animation for you, or it takes an animated sprite 2D and sets up an animation player for you. I just wanted to show you this because I feel like the animation player is important to start to understand and get to know. But yeah, if you have any questions, drop them below in the comments. Official forums or the Discord will get you figured out. That said, I'll see you at the next video.